So we can start, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and welcome to the 9th Zoom lecture of this semester and back to the 56th public lecture series celebrating 30 years of research at the Archaeological Research Unit of the University of Cyprus. I am very pleased to welcome and introduce our tonight's speaker, Dr. Anna Demetriou, a long-term collaborator of the ARU at Mare Lab and postdoctoral fellow since last month. Anna received her bachelor's degree in history and archaeology from the University of Thessaloniki in 2006. Then she continued with her postgraduate studies in the management of archaeological sites at University College London. She was awarded her doctoral title from the University of Cyprus in 2019 after defending her PhD thesis entitled Ancient Shipwreck Sites in Cyprus, Itineraries in the Contemporary World. Anna has been actively involved in the maritime archaeology of Cyprus since 2008, initially as an executive director of the Thetis Foundation, and later as a research assistant at the Maritime Archaeological Research Laboratory, or Mare Lab of the ARU, coordinated by Dr. Stella Demesticha. Since 2012, Anna has been a very active collaborator within several underwater archaeological projects run by the University of Cyprus, at shipwreck sites such as Mazotos, Nisha, and the Protaras shipwreck projects, the Xylophagu Anchorage project, and the Petunda survey, all directed by Stella Demesticha. Anna has also been particularly active in public archaeology, and has been involved in a number of public archaeology and ethnoarchaeological projects. She recently coordinated the Amathos Harbour Underwater Archaeological Park project in the framework of the diving itineraries in maritime protected areas of the Eastern Mediterranean, development of a diving tourism network with the acronym UNDICAT, and Interreg Greece-Cyprus 2014 to 2020 program. She was curator of a virtual exhibition held at the Thalassa Municipal Museum of Agia Napa in 2019 in the context of the European project I Am Agriculture, coordinated by the Cyprus University of Technology. In 2017, Anna was the curator and educator of the multi-location Maritime Outreach Bus, a joint project of the Department of History and Archaeology of the University of Cyprus and the Maritime Archaeology Trust in the UK. She has also conducted an ethnographic survey about the Kyrenia, the Mazotos, and the Nishari shipwrecks in Cyprus. Anna's main research interests focus, as you have gathered, on maritime and shipwreck archaeology, archaeological ethnography, public archaeology, the perception and use of antiquity in contemporary society, and has published studies and taught on related topics at the University of Cyprus as guest lecturer since 2016 in the framework of underwater and MA programs. Anna is currently postdoctoral research fellow at the ARU in the framework of a recently initiated program, SHARE, the title of which is SHARE, Mapping Shipwreck Archaeologies in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Sites, the People, and the Environment, coordinated by Stella Demesticha and funded by the Honor Frost Foundation. Before giving our virtual floor to Anna, I would like to remind you to now switch off your cameras and mute your microphones. Should you wish to address a question or comment to our speaker, feel free to use the chat button in Zoom. You may also switch on your cameras after the end of the presentation to address your question directly to the speaker by raising your hand and unmuting your microphone. Anna, hello again and welcome.
Hello everybody. Let me share my screen. Just a moment, sorry.
Okay.
Okay. So hello everybody again. Thank you for being here all tonight. And thank you, Thanasi, for your introduction. My contact with the ARU actually signaled a shift in my professional career as it introduced me to the maritime archaeological world. Initially, as Thanasi said, through my collaboration from my position at Thetis Foundation with the then visiting lecturer of maritime archaeology, Stella Demesticha, and then as a PhD student at the unit under her supervision. It is therefore an honor for me to be now part of the postdoctoral researchers team of the ARU and to be able to contribute to this lecture series. My research, which I am going to talk about tonight, would not have been possible without the generous support of the Honor Frost Foundation. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Foundation publicly, not only for funding the current project. In the course of its tireless efforts to promote the development of maritime archaeological research on the island since 2011, I have been a recipient of its support on several occasions. Today's presentation will focus on my postdoctoral research, which I have only just begun, entitled Mapping Shipwreck Archaeologies in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Sites, the People, and the Environment. With this lecture, we will move from the terrestrial to the maritime world and to ancient shipwreck sites. We will make yet another shift regarding the approach of study, as the aim of the project is not to examine ancient shipwreck sites per se, but to trace and understand the history of the development of the field in the wider Eastern Mediterranean, therefore the Levant Sea and the Aegean. As Lynn Meskel has put it, the materiality and the practice of archaeology in the region is inextricably linked to the political and cultural realities faced by their respective peoples. Indeed, the implications of these realities are reflected on the ways the past and its material remains are perceived, studied, interpreted, and used in contemporary society. In this context, shipwrecks, the most commonly and thoroughly investigated type of underwater archaeological remains, set distinctive parameters. The particularities of the development of the field from the 1960s onwards, as well as of the ships as archaeological source material, defined a unique path for the development of shipwreck archaeological practice, not only in the region, but around the world in general. The aim of the project is to identify and analyze the intellectual, institutional, and professional structures of shipwreck archaeological practice in the region, aspiring to provide the necessary tools that will facilitate future innovative research and management planning of ancient shipwrecks in the Eastern Mediterranean. In order to do that, the project will focus on the documentation of the different aspects of the ancient shipwrecks located in the area, dated from prehistory to the 19th century AD. For a comprehensive understanding of the matter, the documentation will develop around three distinct but interrelated aspects of their itinerant lives: their archaeological, their intellectual, and their social context. The first aspect will focus on the past biography of the sites. A database will be developed that will include information about the sites located in the region and the archaeological material preserved. At the same time, approaching shipwrecks as places of the present times, which inevitably are socially constructed and continuously transformed by the people associated with them, the project will document their intellectual context. That is, the various archaeological traditions and tendencies employed in their research and management, as well as the variables that formed and transformed diverse practices through the years. Finally, following the same line of thought, the project will also examine the social context of the sites by documenting the personal stories of the people involved in the field and the socio-political background of the work undertaken over the years. Obviously, it would have been impossible to provide any outcomes of the project that has not even completed a month's work. Therefore, this presentation will follow a rather different direction. Before discussing in more detail the work that will take place in the framework of the project, I will attempt a preliminary discussion on what was the incentive for its initiation. The first part of the presentation will evolve around work compiled during my PhD research, a catalog documenting basic information about the shipwrecks located in the region, dating from prehistory up to the 19th century AD, and an ethnographic survey conducted regarding the distinct contemporary social context of ancient shipwrecks in Cyprus. I hope that through this initial discussion, I can share my enthusiasm about the project and underline the manifold aspects of examining the history of shipwreck archaeology in the region, but also the prospects in the study of the archaeological field in general. Let us start by examining the archaeological context. Back in 1978, in his seminal book, Maritime Archaeology, Keith McElroy indicated that in any pre-industrial society, from the Upper Paleolithic to the 19th century AD, a boat, or later a ship, was the largest and most complex machine produced. Over 30 years later, John Adams observed that this claim still holds true in the space age. In the late 1970s, McElroy introduced the triple definition of ships as complex machines, as instruments adapted to a function, and as closed social environments. Three aspects that, however, cannot be appreciated detached from their physical and social constraints, that is, their environment, as well as the ideologies and traditions associated with them. As objects whose conception, design, construction, and use represent important aspects of their societies, ships constitute a primary source of archaeological evidence. Their distinctive position and site formation processes add another level of significance on the archaeological material preserved. As you can see on the diagram, out of the 741 shipwrecks documented in the Eastern Mediterranean, only 70 are the outcome of ritual depositions and abandonment. In fact, most of the sites are the result of a catastrophic event. The accidental wrecking of a ship accords to all the features of the deposit a contemporaneity in the context of the wrecking event. This, in turn, opens up significant possibilities for their archaeological interpretation. The preservation of the objects within their context of use renders a high relationality to the material preserved and provides a glimpse of a single moment in the past to a degree that it is difficult to derive from many other types of sites. The oldest shipwrecks located in the Eastern Mediterranean date to the 30th century BC. In the Levant Sea, the remains of the Athlete North Bay shipwreck represent the oldest direct evidence of maritime connections between Egypt and the northern coast of Canaan. Although the catalog compiled is at the moment by no means exhaustive, the numbers of shipwrecks provided indicate some general trends regarding the type of material preserved and its significance. In total, 28 shipwrecks located in the region are dated to the Bronze Age, most of them scattered. Number of sites in general, but also the number of better preserved shipwrecks increases in the subsequent periods. Their state of preservation defines research possibilities and the type of information that can be collected regarding the different aspects of the ships. Examination of the ships as such is rather difficult, as their structure can only be preserved in waterlogged, anaerobic, anoxic environment. However, out of the 113 shipwrecks fully or partially excavated in the region, 44 retain the structure of the ship in a fairly good state of preservation. These provide important insights into the evolution of shipbuilding techniques from the classical to the pre-modern period. Most of the shipwrecks located in the region represent the remains of merchant ships, while only a very limited number of sites preserve the remains of galleys and fishing boats. In fact, the cargo of ancient merchant ships is the most usual find located on ancient shipwreck sites. Whether scattered or retaining a good state of preservation, the examination of its type, provenance, content, and quantities can provide important information about traded goods, sailing routes, or the ports of origin and destination. Finally, ships represent a distinct socio-cultural space. However, this is an aspect of the ship that it is not easily visible, as in most of the cases, the total excavation of the ships is required in order to retrieve relevant information. As you can see here, how limited information we have about this section of ships. In any case, the type of information shipwreck archaeological research could provide is directly related to the research and management strategies adopted in each case, therefore, their intellectual context. Shipwreck archaeology followed a distinct path of development. The new field did not emerge from the need of established academic disciplines for supplementary data. Instead, it developed out of the need to confront the increased shipwreck amateur explorations following the post-war economic boom and the development of diving in the 1940s. Work undertaken in the Eastern Mediterranean in this context contained the seeds for the scientific development of shipwreck archaeology. In the late 1950s, while Honor Frost was working on shipwreck sites in Turkey, she substantiated the significance of archaeological observation, documentation, and comparative study of underwater archaeological sites. The foundations of the field were established a few years later, in 1960, when it was acknowledged that it is far easier to teach diving to archaeologists than archaeology to a diver. The first systematic and professionally directed shipwreck excavation at the Cape Gelidonia shipwreck in Turkey, under the direction of George Bass, prepared the ground for a number of shipwreck projects that ensued. During the first 20 years of shipwreck archaeology in the region, 5 well-preserved sites were excavated by the University of Pennsylvania. With such an active presence in the area, the American Institute of Nautical Archaeology was established in the early 1970s with its headquarters in Turkey. The work undertaken corresponded to the needs of the newly founded field, to gather the necessary material in order to build a body of knowledge that would form the theoretical premise of shipwreck archaeology. In this respect, at a time when the archaeological discipline had lost its innocence, shipwreck archaeology in the region remained focused on a cultural historical paradigm. In addition to the excavations, surface surveys, mainly focusing on scattered shipwrecks, also took place in the region. American and British institutions were active in this domain in most of the Eastern Mediterranean countries, namely Cyprus, Lebanon, Syria, and Turkey. On the other hand, from the early 1970s, local institutions focusing on underwater archaeological research were active in Greece and Israel and engaged not only in the survey of ancient shipwrecks, but also, in some cases, in their partial excavation. The same tendencies continued in the years that followed. During the 1980s to 2000s, surface surveys increased significantly. The Americans, through the projects of INA, in Turkey dominated the work undertaken by foreign institutions in the region. During that period, the Institute of Nautical Archaeology undertook the survey of numerous sites in the country and completed the excavation of 4 shipwrecks, while they also engaged in surveys in Israel, although there was never follow-up. At the same time, a French institution, the European Institute of Maritime Archaeology, under the direction of Frank Godio, made a first but very dynamic appearance in Egypt through the survey of 70 shipwrecks located in the submerged city of Heraklion Thonis and the excavation of the Roman shipwreck of Antirodos. Furthermore, local institutions expanded their activities in the region. In Greece, the F48 of Underwater Archaeology and the Hellenic Institute of Maritime Archaeology extended the scope of their activities significantly with the inspection and survey of a significant number of shipwreck sites of different dates and characteristics. The Institute also engaged in the excavation of 2 late Bronze Age shipwrecks at Thokos and Iria, while the F48 engaged in the partial excavation of 5 sites, 2 classical, 2 Hellenistic, and 1 pre-modern. In Israel, on the other hand, academic institutions based at the Tel Aviv University and at the University of Haifa broadened their activities through surveys, but also 7 important excavations of shipwrecks of different dates. Finally, a local academic institution in Turkey, the Istanbul University, participates for the first time in a shipwreck excavation project at the Chamalti-Burnu shipwreck. The numerous projects that took place in the region focused mainly on site-specific projects and the documentation of the material preserved. It was only following the 2000s that a gradual shift was observed in the field. The survey and excavation of specific sites continues in the region, mainly in Turkey, Israel, Greece, and from the 2000s, Cyprus. Particularly Cyprus, through the Maritime Archaeological Research Laboratory of the ARU, initiated dynamic activity in the field with the excavation of the classical Mazotos shipwreck, the partial excavation of the Ottoman Nisya shipwreck, and the documentation of the Roman site of Protaras. At the same time, ancient shipwrecks are documented in the framework of regional projects that seek to examine the maritime cultural landscape of specific areas, an approach that has been introduced in the region by Greece, like the example of the Fourni Underwater Archaeological Survey in the Aegean Sea, which brought to light over 50 shipwrecks. In the same context, and as technological developments advance, Greece also expanded activities to include examination of deep water shipwreck sites in collaboration with local as well as American and Norwegian institutions. It is therefore evident that the intellectual landscape of shipwreck archaeology in the region gradually changes. Let us now turn to the final context of ancient shipwreck sites, their contemporary cultural landscape. In the framework of the SHARE project, particularly, focus will be placed on the people interacting with shipwrecks within the professional archaeological circles. Archaeological sites do not encompass fixed values associated exclusively with the past. Upon their discovery, they are engaged in new social contexts which attach to the sites new roles and meanings and transform their use and position in contemporary society. Therefore, the significance of archaeological sites does not merely lie in the specific knowledge they provide about the past, but also in the processes of engaging with the material remains in the present. It is thus vital to examine the contemporary social context of archaeological sites to define their distinct engagements and to identify the continuously reshaped perceptions, negotiations, and practices developed around them. This is particularly interesting for ancient shipwreck sites. Following their discovery, the sites engage with a variety of community groups, professionals, local communities, fishermen, and divers. The underwater environment of their deposition defines the particularities of these engagements, either through the absence of any visual stimuli for those who cannot dive, or through the intimate, embodied encounters that divers experience underwater. The shipwreck catalog already discussed does not include any information about the social context of the sites located in the region. However, another type of survey carried out during my PhD research underlined the necessity for such an approach. To comprehend the diverse non-professional negotiations developed around the 3 shipwreck sites excavated in Cyprus, the Kerinia, the Mazotos, and the Niskia shipwrecks, ethnographical research was undertaken around the social groups associated with the maritime and terrestrial spatial context. Professionals were beyond the scope of this research. Nevertheless, the narratives of the diving community indicated that the particularities of the underwater environment set the background for a distinct, direct engagement with antiquities. Diving is a setting for aesthetic impressions and fascination with the underwater world. It presupposes certain skills beyond the habitual sensation, during which the body learns to adapt to the new fluid environment, confront the somatic effects of pressure and temperature, and move effectively. This fact generates intense feelings and a sense of achievement among divers. As characteristically described, man was created to walk, not to dive in the water or put all that gear and compete with fish as rivals. Besides the physical effects, the submergence to what has been described by Cousteau as the silent world intensifies the diver's sensory engagement. In the absence of any verbal communication and under the constant background sound of their breath, the underwater environment generates a feeling of calm and peace. This lends to the diving experience a certain sensorial and mnemonic depth, since, as described by a diver, this is a place where you're all alone, or, as described by another diver, this is a place where you are liberated. At the same time, connected to the established idea of the sea, and thus to the notions of adventure and discovery, the underwater world triggers the imagination and generates a significant impact on the people. One of the main motivations of divers is the interaction with what has been described with places that no one else has ever seen before. The exclusiveness of this experience, as well as the feelings of achievement and liberation associated with it, produce a strong sense of attachment and belonging around the sites visited. All the above concern the non-professional diving community. However, as the underwater world is a lived space for the diver, in the sense that they can totally submerge into it and interact with its different features, the feelings and experiences described cannot but also affect the divers that form part of the professional community. The physical effects of diving define the ways ancient shipwrecks located underwater are sensed and perceived and possess certain constraints in the work undertaken. In contrast to engagement with terrestrial archaeological sites, underwater sites can only be sensed through vision. However, sensed only through a medium that reduces the spectrum of light that is visible to the human eye means that we cannot have a full vision of the underwater sites as we would in the air. In addition to that, shipwreck archaeological research of sites located underwater requires the control of the somatic effects of pressure and temperature of the body. In contrast to terrestrial archaeological projects, the time one can spend underwater is limited and defined by the conditions of the underwater environment, namely the depth and the temperature. Under these conditions, archaeologists working underwater have only a limited amount of time to spend on the site, a time during which they need to engage into the different archaeological procedures, while at the same time they attempt to control possible shifts in their perception deriving from the depth, but also the extensive tiredness diving is associated with. Consequently, underwater archaeological projects presuppose procedures that require particular training and experience, as well as costly equipment. As lived experiences around the sea are integral to the negotiation and formation of distinct identities, working underwater contributed to the formation of particular professional identities. Indeed, Joe Flatman has characterized the community of maritime archaeologists as an insular community with its own codes, social codes, language, and even clothes, obsessed with technology and gadgets, which is nevertheless necessary to overcome the barriers set by the medium of water. All the issues described up to now play a significant role in delineating the position of ancient shipwreck sites in contemporary society. On one hand, the somatic effects of diving and its consequences on underwater archaeological practice define not only the ways ancient shipwreck sites are perceived by the professional community, they also affect the decisions made for their research and management, as well as of the particular archaeological treatments, and also, as a result, their interpretation and presentation to the public. Finally, as diving and the embodied engagement with ancient shipwreck sites generate intense feelings, the interaction of a certain group of people on a regular basis and for an extended length of time, for as long as a shipwreck archaeological project holds, adds another level of significance to the sites. It accords to them a social time, which includes the contemporary experiences and interactions produced around them, which in turn credits the site with additional roles and meanings associated with the contemporary social conditions prevailing. In this respect, to understand and analyze shipwreck archaeological practice in the Eastern Mediterranean, it is necessary to expand research towards the professional communities associated with the sites and attempt to trace their personal stories regarding their engagements with the sites. What I have presented up to now are some preliminary thoughts of a first, but far from an in-depth attempt to approach the different aspects of shipwreck archaeological practice in the region. However, what I consider as the most important outcome of the work undertaken thus far is that it underlined the multiple prospects of such an approach in the study of the field. A detailed documentation of the archaeological material preserved could act as an important tool in examining the distinct features of ancient shipwrecks preserved in the area. And more importantly, it could provide the ground for further research towards new directions. In this regard, it could also be fundamental to move beyond the archaeological material per se to the identification and documentation of the diverse practices applied during the discovery, research, and management of ancient shipwrecks. Such a step could contribute to the understanding of the traditions active in the area and the variables that define the decision-making procedures. As the Mestica and Blue have underlined in the recent publication, similar approaches can draw useful conclusions about the current state of the discipline and set the grounds for critical discussions about the position of shipwreck archaeology, both in the region and in the world in general. Finally, work undertaken up to now indicates that the endeavor to engage in the transdisciplinary field of ethnography in this context is worthwhile. It could prove instrumental in the pursuit of a deeper and more spherical understanding of ancient shipwreck sites as places of interaction in the present and their position in contemporary society. All the above were the main incentives for the development of the 2-year postdoctoral research project that has just begun at the ARU under the coordination of Stella Domestica. The aspiration is to contribute to the comprehensive understanding of the development of shipwreck archaeology in the region. The project, with the abbreviated form SHARE, provides the framework to continue the work undertaken thus far for a more detailed documentation and analysis of the diverse context of the ancient shipwrecks located in the Eastern Mediterranean. With regard to the archaeological context, a variety of sources will be examined, including official reports, bibliographical sources, as well as available documentaries, publications, and newspaper articles. The objective will be to collect information about the location of the sites, their natural and cultural environment, their state of preservation, as well as details about the material preserved. At the same time, information regarding the intellectual context of the sites will be collated. During the review of the published material, the various theoretical and methodological approaches applied to research, interpretation, and management methods of ancient shipwrecks will be documented and assessed. In the process of the material collection phase, newly discovered sites will be integrated and additional material such as photos and more details about the research undertaken and the finds located will complement the existing catalog. At the same time, an effort will be made to overcome the obstacles and limitations identified when compiling the shipwreck catalog referred to earlier, namely accessibility to the necessary sources. Particularly during the compilation of the existing list of shipwrecks, it was not possible to access on the island the archaeological reports of all the relevant countries. Moreover, language was a barrier in reviewing reports or articles from countries such as Israel and Turkey. To bypass these obstacles, students from each country of the wider Eastern Mediterranean will be encouraged to participate in the project and contribute to the material collection. I'm sorry. In this frame, the students will review the information collected on the archaeological and intellectual context of the shipwreck sites located in their respective countries, and they will gather archival information on the development of shipwreck archaeology in their areas. The students' contribution in the project will not only help overcome the existing obstacles in the material collection process, it will also respond to the Honor Frost Foundation main objective to offer opportunities to young researchers in the region to develop skills in the field. In this regard, the students will also be encouraged to participate in 3 webinars that will be organized by the Archaeological Research Unit, which will introduce the archaeological and anthropological methods of research in the field. A variety of methods will also be applied in the framework of the SHARE project for the documentation of the contemporary social context of the shipwreck sites. Initially, archival sources such as documentaries, publications, and newspaper articles published at distinct times and countries will be reviewed. Moreover, interviews will be conducted to collect personal testimonies and recollections of key figures involved in the field. In order to achieve a holistic approach, interviews will target professionals that are or have been involved in shipwreck archaeology in the region. That have been involved in shipwreck archaeology in the region at different times, in the different countries under study, and with different specialties in the field, working on different types of sites. Interviews will also target volunteer divers working in shipwreck archaeological projects, as they also comprise an integral part of the contemporary cultural landscape of the sites. However, due to time limitations, only divers based in Cyprus that are members of the Maritime Archaeological Research Laboratory research team will be interviewed. I trust it has become evident that SHARE will produce a comprehensive record of the history of shipwreck archaeology in the region with multiple sources. As we believe that knowledge sharing may motivate new ways of engagement with the past and the present, encourage scientific research, and promote protection of maritime cultural heritage, the second main component of the project will focus on how to make this information accessible to both professionals and non-professionals. The most basic deliverable of SHARE is the development of an open access shipwrecks database that will include the information collected. With the purpose of meeting the needs of researchers and the public, and in order to ensure protection on the personal information collected during the interviews, the database will develop on 3 levels. A GIS map, which will include basic information about ancient shipwreck sites located in the area. This section will mainly seek to correspond to the expectation of the public, and therefore it will not provide more details about the sites. I need to note here that the exact location of the sites will not be available to ensure their protection. On a second level, detailed information of the shipwreck sites documented will be provided. This will be available to both researchers and the public. Researchers, in particular, will be able to download the catalog produced and use it for their own research. Finally, a digital archive of the transcribed interviews, which will be accessible exclusively by divers, will conclude the method of presentation. Although the interviews will be recorded and transcribed, not all data will be available online. To that end, each person will be interviewed twice. The first interview will focus on the history of the discipline and will be published online, citing the interviewer's name. The second interview, which will focus on personal experience and thoughts, will be archived but will remain confidential. Aiming to make the material collected available in the most user-friendly manner and to promote its discoverability and accessibility, users will be able to navigate the shipwreck database and the interviews through keywords combinations, which will enable combined searches and retrieval of information on a variety of research questions so as to facilitate research in the field. As I said at the introduction of this presentation, it would have been impossible to present any conclusions at such an early stage of the SHARE project. However, I hope that by sharing my initial thoughts and plans regarding the project that has just begun, I have underlined its importance. This would be the first time that such a spherical approach towards shipwrecks archaeological research in the region, but also in general, will be attempted. It will contribute not only in understanding the current state of the field. These important records could also serve as benchmark to promote new research tools that will enhance future research and management of ancient shipwrecks in the area. I believe that the importance of these projects extends to 2 other areas as well. The collaboration with other universities from the Eastern Mediterranean region for the material collection could offer possibilities to young researchers to gain experience on the matter, while it could also set the ground for future cooperations in the field. More importantly, the fact that all the material collected will be accessible to researchers around the world could prompt research in the field towards diverse trajectories. Finally, I hope that this project will act as springboard leading towards a more socially related and reflexive shipwreck archaeological practice in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for this fascinating overview of maritime archaeology in Cyprus and neighboring countries, and for sharing the aims and methodology of the project with everyone. It's, as you mentioned, it's a new project. It's a recently initiated project. Yet it is worth noting that you move beyond, as you indicated, the study of the archaeological material per se into, and you move into documenting archaeological practices and the perception of shipwreck archaeology by contemporary societies. And that's very useful. We all need to, take time off the archaeological material and consider, evaluated methodologies and approaches, interpretations to all kinds of archaeologies, not just underwater archaeology. So that's fascinating. There is so much scope in this, especially in what regards, the reception of underwater heritage and its promotion, or towards also the creation of identities, whatever identities it may be. I'm sure your presentation has intrigued the interest of our participants today. So we'll need to take time to go through the comments that may be on our chat, or perhaps questions. Apart from